Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode on Switch City, where we're doing our power rankings, looking at each team leading up to the season, ranking them from 30 to 1, looking at their additions, their subtractions, who they kept, players I think fit in well with the squad, players that I don't necessarily fit well, and my overall record prediction for each team leading up to the season. Today's episode, as you guys can tell from the thumbnail and from the title, we're going to be talking about and breaking down the Dallas Mavericks, and a team that I think made a ton of moves that definitely upgraded their team and their holes that they had. So we're going to look at their quest and getting back into the Western Conference Finals. Will they do it? What moves did they make that I think look solid? What moves do I don't think look the greatest? And who might be the odd man out on their team? We're going to get into all of that and more on this episode. So make sure to grab a snack and get into it. Like I said, we're going to be discussing the Dallas Mavericks in today's episode. And if you guys have missed previous episodes, if you want to kind of go back and look at the rankings, go check those ones out after this one. But like I said in the introduction, we're going to look at the Mavericks and look at their re signings, their additions, and their departures, kind of looking at what this team went to do in its upgrades. And this team definitely, I think, made some upgrades on that. And for first, let's look at their re signings. As the Mavericks brought back two players, Brandon Williams and Markieff Morris. Now, Markieff Morris kind of being one of the players in the end of their contract, and Brandon Williams being on a lower deal. Now, for additions, this team did go out and bring in four new players. They went out and acquired Klay Thompson, who was one of the big free agency signings this year. He agreed to join the Mavericks in a sign and trade from the Warriors. They also went out and got Quentin Grimes in a trade with the Pistons and signed two players in Najee Marshall and Spencer Dinwiddie to help their guard room and Najee Marshall to help out their forward room. They did lose three players though in this off season, but ultimately getting their additions to replace said three players. They lost Derrick Jones Jr. as he went to the Clippers in free agency, and they got Najee Marshall to replace him. They had Tim Hardaway Jr., who departed via the Pistons. They went out and got Quentin Grimes. And they also traded away Josh Green as he was traded to the Hornets in a three-team deal where they ultimately went out and signed Klay Thompson. So overall, this Mavericks team, now the team that made the Western Conference Finals, led by Kyrie Irving, Luka Doncic, now has Klay Thompson to add on to the fire with PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford, and obviously Derek Lively from last season. Like I mentioned, they added Najee Marshall, Quentin Grimes. They do have some other players as well, and Dante Exum, Dwight Powell, and Maxi Kleber that are still on the squad, with Dante Exum also making a nice return. They also have young players and Jaden Hardy and Olivier Maxence Prosper, who look very, very solid and have some bright spots as well. And this Mavericks team is not only top heavy and contention, but they also have some nice youth movement as well. And like I said, I think this team is kind of built for success. They're going to be a top tier team in the West for the foreseeable future as long as they stay healthy. And they've kind of filled in their holes that they kind of lacked in last season, as we saw in the playoffs when they matched up against the Boston Celtics. They had some wing shooters and some scoring, but once it came to the finals, it kind of disappeared and disapparated. And they also lost some wing defense as well, going up against players like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. It was easier for those players to guard players like Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. So they went out and got some more size, added some beefiness on the defensive side. They made their big acquisitions in their front court, which they desperately needed in the middle of the season, which helped strengthen them to make the finals. And ultimately, this Mavericks team is going to be a top tier team. So let's look at some players that I think are going to fit in well and look nice with this squad. It's players that I necessarily don't think have a long term stay here in Dallas. So, like I said in the introduction, I think the Mavericks went out there and made moves in every aspect to upgrade themselves. They had players in Tim Hardaway Jr., Derrick Jones Jr., and Josh Green, who were all on the roster. And even though they were all capable and still quality role players, I think they went out and got upgrades for each position to help out. And I'll explain why. First, we're going to talk about Quentin Grimes, as I think he's one of the players to kind of look out with this Dallas Mavericks team. Now, Grimes was on a New York Knicks squad, kind of logged into that backcourt, but did show some promise coming off that bench as a 3-and-D player. And I think he could present that self for this Dallas Mavericks team that desperately needs that, as we saw in the NBA Finals, as that's something they lacked. Now, I know he's kind of similar to the replacement for Josh Green, even though he was acquired for Tim Hardaway Jr., and I think that he's going to be able to provide some better playmaking and defense than Josh Green, but also some better scoring as well for this Mavericks team, as well being that replacement. In Detroit, he didn't get that much ample run time either, and I think he's still a player with untapped potential that can still grow and kind of reach that type of piece. And I think he's going to be similar into Dante, like a player like Dante Exum, where Exum may be a better playmaker and defender. I think Grimes might be a little bit better on the offensive side than Exum, but add some also added versatility to just having players that in a league where it's kind of positionless, players that can kind of play multiple positions will definitely help you out. Exum being able to play 1 through 3, Grimes being able to play basically 1 through 3, maybe not the best at point guard, but primarily 2 through 3 is going to be huge. And adding and complementing players like Luka and Kyrie, who also can kind of play positionless with as many multiple players as well, with Luka being able to play 1 through 3. And another one I want to talk about is Najee Marshall. Like I said, Najee Marshall last season on the Pelicans was kind of viewed as a trade piece just because he was on an expiring contract on his rookie scale extension, and a lot of teams were definitely eyeing him, and the Pelicans definitely didn't want to give him up as they felt like he could help out their team and help out their push. But unfortunately for the Pelicans, that was a little bit of a bad move because in my eyes, could have at least gotten some capital and got some stuff off of for Najee for a player in Najee Marshall. Unfortunately, you just lose him for nothing with him signing to Dallas, and ultimately he fills that hole for Derrick Jones Jr., where, yes, Derrick Jones Jr. is definitely a way better defender. He's a better lob threat. He is definitely, better on that defensive side. So do you get a little bit worse on that defensive side? Yes, but I do believe that Najee Marshall is still very, very good on the defensive side, that he's still going to hold over and still be able to replace Derrick Jones Jr., but adds more on the offensive side. Like we said, he's a better scorer. He has a little bit of a game in the post. He can stretch out a little bit. And I think adding that to this Mavericks team, once again, is huge. Like we said, the Mavericks' main issue in the playoffs was their lack of scoring. They couldn't keep up with that Boston Celtics team, and they couldn't defend them. And in the playoffs, they had some lucky chances with some of their role players stemming up, but in the finals, it just didn't deliver. So adding another scorer in Najee Marshall, who just adds more to that offensive side, just ultimately helps them out. Another addition in Klay Thompson, I think, is going to be big as well. He seemingly replaces Tim Hardaway Jr. in their lineup, and I think he's just going to be a better, more consistent Tim Hardaway Jr. The only concern I have for Klay Thompson and why I didn't mention him in one of the players that I'm really looking forward to for this team is just that Klay Thompson, the last time we saw him, didn't look the greatest shooting over 10, and Klay's also dealt with some injury issues getting a little bit older. And with this Mavericks team bringing on a player that's a little bit older and a little bit injured, yes, he does add some ample shooting. He's going to be their third scorer. He's going to be a standout player for them. He's got to be able to play for them and deliver every single time. And can I count on Klay Thompson to do that every single time? Maybe as a third star, but with the Warriors, we couldn't really trust it in the last couple seasons as a second star. So it's something I got to believe in a little bit more. But I do think that he is a definite upgrade over Tim Hardaway Jr. Way, way, way for sure. And I think that he is going to add to their scoring in unit alongside PJ Washington as well. But ultimately, I do still think there's a little bit of an asterisk going over at Klay Thompson. I think Najee Marshall and Quentin Grimes are clear upgrades over Josh Green and Derrick Jones Jr. But that's not even a knock on Klay Thompson. He's not even one of the players that I dislike or doesn't even think I fit in with this team. I still think he does add some greatness to the squad, and the Mavericks are going to be better with him. So let's dive in and let's look at some players that I necessarily don't think really fit, really work. And unfortunately, it's going to be Maxi Kleber here. And I guess you can kind of loop in Dwight Powell as well. I kind of forgot about him when I was kind of grabbing players. But yeah, I would say Maxi Kleber and Dwight Powell kind of just don't really make sense in this center group anymore. And like I said, unfortunately, it's just because the emergence of their other guys. They went out and had Derek Lively, who was their first round draft pick last year after not making the playoffs. And he showcased that he could be a lob threat. He could showcase he could bring some defensive pressure and really brought to this Mavericks team like, hey, if you have a top tier center, if you have that guy, you are going to be set up to do things in the future, and especially having a center that can work on the offensive side of the ball as alongside the defensive side of the ball to work alongside Luka, it just makes it easier. And then adding Daniel Gafford as that defensive anchor to kind of help out on the defensive side to kind of occupy what Derek Lively doesn't necessarily have right from the get. Also added some interior presence for this team to really put them over the top. But when you look at this Dallas Mavericks team and you think about the other two players in Cleveland and Powell, they kind of realistically don't fit in, and I don't see them getting much playing time. Both are technically backup, what, tertiary power forwards and centers, I guess, for this team at this point. And if they're both making some ample money on your team, I think you would rather fill in the role with a player that can provide something coming off the bench than a player Maxi Kleber. We saw Kleber get some run through the playoffs and him look good in some aspects, but as a stretch big as a shooter, he's all right, but sometimes and most of the time he's very inconsistent, specifically with this Mavericks team a little bit later in his career. And we've kind of seen the the emergence of that big with Kleba and with Bertans seemingly kind of fade away a little bit, just as those players had really good seasons and just haven't been able to eclipse that since then. And I think with Kleba, the writing on the wall might be there too. With Powell as well, again, he's just a rebounding big, offensive rebounding big as primarily. And again, you have Lively, you have Daniel Gafford. He's the third center. You keep him maybe for some depth, but ultimately, if we want to look at this team and look at their salary cap and stuff like that, like we said, Kleba's making around $11 million, and Dwight Powell is making right around $4 million. So if I'm the Dallas Mavericks, we're already in a win now mode. We already want to try to win a championship. We're already trying to compete. Why am I holding a guy in Max Kleba on $11 million? You just have him right on the bench and do nothing? I don't necessarily know. Now I know with Kleba, there's not a lot of people that are gonna want him on an $11 million contract, so it's gonna have to be a salary dump. Maybe you're only getting a second round pick. Maybe you're using a buyout option to kind of bring in a filler replacement if that's the case. But ultimately, if you look to trade Maxi Kleber or Dwight Powell, that's something that I could see the Mavericks do. And if there's a hole in this team, or if there's some injury to this team leading with a hole, I could see them going out and getting a said player to kind of fill that hole in for this squad to kind of push them over the top in this West. So now with that out the way, let's get to the record prediction and let's look at this. Like I said, the record prediction is going to be wonky, letting you all know. But the Mavericks coming in, like I said, third place in the Western Conference here, 59-23, a better record than they had last season, and that's honestly because I think they're starting off with a better overall team going into the year. Like we saw with the Mavericks last season, they were a little bit of second half risers. They were in that like late pack of the Western Conference kind of going into the trade deadline, and then they made a bunch of switches, bringing in PJ Washington, bringing in guys like Daniel Gafford, and that really took them over the top with this squad. And ultimately, they made even more improvements through the offseason, so I do think they're going to be better than the 5 seed they were slated in last year in the West. Ultimately, this Western Conference is very tough. Like I said, I had the Nuggets in our yesterday's video coming in at fourth, so putting in Dallas at 3 is very tough. I think they're very, very close with the second place team that I have them competing with, but ultimately, the second place team that I do have in the Western Conference. If you guys have seen the other videos, you could probably infer who those top 4 teams that we have yet to break down are. But ultimately, with their preseason, I've seen some likes from some of their players they've added, and it's kind of changed my mind on the team. I still think they're a top 2 team in the West, but ultimately, I still think Dallas could eclipse maybe even the 1 seed, if 2 seed, if healthy, if the moves are right, and even if they made even more moves, like I said, moving Powell and moving a player in Kleba to kind of bring in some additional help, I think it could even ample the Mavericks' chances of going to the championship and possibly even winning it for Luka Doncic. So let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. What do you guys think about the Dallas Mavericks coming in here as my 5th highest team in the NBA? Kind of crazy to say that now, but yeah, we only got 4 teams left to break down leading up to the season. So if you've been along for the ride, I really do appreciate you guys sticking with it, paying attention as we revitalize this channel. But if you are new, if this is your first time checking us out, go check out the previous videos on all the other power rankings. Let me know what you guys think on this video and the previous ones down in the comment section. If you guys do enjoy the channel, hitting a like, hitting the subscribe button means the world as we're trying to get this booming through the regular season. Like I said, we're going to have videos coming out all throughout the regular season covering all NBA stuff, news, game reactions, talking about players. So if you want to stay up to that, get all that news, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. You guys know what to do. Once again, I'm Bruce Veliz. You guys have been absolutely fantastic. Have a great rest of your day. Peace out, everyone.